All right. Welcome, community of love, wherever you are in this amazing planet. So remember, this program is about the spiritual, love, family, self, and money relationships. This is your host, Lilia Ackerman, as the raw truth digger. Because I am a strong believer that in order to reconnect, rebuild, and revive your relationships, you must remove your inner conflict to operate from the true self and get the right mindset to live your extraordinary life. I'm a certified transformational wellness master coach and self publisher. You can grab a copy of my books. Here is one of them, From Gloom to Bloom. And if you are Spanish speaker, sorry, here we go, De la Penumbra a la Aurora. And I will post a link under below this video. So guess what? Today, our amazing star is Richard Villasana, a founder of the international nonprofit Forever Homes for Foster Kids. Richard has received recognition as the one of the Californian Heroes. I really like that one. I mean, what amazing! I can't wait to hear that story. And he wrote a book that is on Amazon. Do no harm. So he's gonna talk about this during our interview. And thank you. What an honor to have you today, Richard. And thank you for being with us. And since I have known you, I really admire your passion, dedication. And I have to tell you, you are one of the most compassionate people I met in my life. So before we dive into our conversation, please share with us a couple of things about you. One is when you're not working, what do you do for fun?
Well, I really like to hike. So I like being outside, being with nature. Although sometimes it's nice just to walk around a big shopping center, watching people and just being outside. Because I think a lot of us nowadays are spending so much time inside, indoors, especially during COVID. So it's so nice to be outside. And so anytime I can, even if it's driving, it's just nice to be outside.
That's beautiful. That is word. Oh yes, I agree with you 100%. And then tell us, what is your favorite movie?
It would
Oh,
probably be The Fifth Element with Bruce Willis. I love that movie. It's crazy sci-fi. Um, it's just a lot of fun, a lot of action, a lot of funny silliness, but it's a great movie and what I call good family entertainment.
okay, wonderful. So, well, now let's start with Richard, his nonprofit organization. But let's start with a little bit hard question. What is the most frustrating thing or challenge you encounter at the beginning of your passion?
So the biggest challenge that I had was actually a challenge that many people have, and that was not recognizing my talent. A lot of
Oh,
people have a talent and they're very good at something, and their friends will tell them how wonderful they are. And it could be crafts, it could be cooking, it could be the way they do something. It could be something as, we might think as mundane as accounting. But if you've ever owed taxes to the government, you would love to have an accountant who knows what they're doing and can help you save money on your taxes. So it's not mundane to the taxpayer. It's very worthwhile and a wonderful thing, whatever this skill is that people have. And we all have a talent. The problem is, a lot of times we don't recognize it for the talent it is. So in my case, years ago, I had met a gentleman named Antoine Morrison, and this person had done work internationally. He'd done work with Fortune 500 companies. He was the guy who set up multi-million-dollar deals all over Latin America. And he was in who's who of at least half a dozen countries in Latin America. And so here's this person who had done so much, and he was willing to take me on as a protege and to be my mentor. And so we worked together. And because we had worked together, he saw something. He saw that I had this ability to look at information, the same information anyone could look at, but I was able to see information that led me to those people. So I used this talent to find government officials that we needed to talk to, that we wanted to talk to, that people would have, if I can use the term, killed to have found so they could have done business. So, for instance, I found one woman with we were selling medical equipment from the US into Mexico. And
Okay.
I found the one woman of one of the top three government agencies in Mexico that bought billions and billions of dollars of medical equipment. And I found her, and she was in this little building in the south part of Mexico City. And I actually had to beg Antoine to go meet with this woman because I knew she was important, but I couldn't tell him why she was important. It was one of those things I just had this sensation, this feeling. People would say, my gut was telling me I needed to do this. And I kept bugging
Mhm.
him. We were down there on a trip, and on the fourth day, he finally relented and said, "Look, if we go meet this woman, you promise you're never going to mention her again for the rest of this trip." I promise. So we go down. And the reason why we were in the north part of Mexico City, which is huge, there's only 21 million people there.
Oh,
And so it took us about 3 hours to get to the south part of Mexico City. So and it was going to take up half, if not all of our day to do this one trip. And so we went down there, we're in the building, and then he points to the board that has all the officials listed. He said, "Is this the person we're going to go see?" I said, "Martha Gurria." "Yes, that's who we're going to go see." "This is the lady." "Yes." "Do you know who she is?" "Yes." "No? Maybe?" "Who is she?" Because I could tell by his expression that maybe I didn't know who she was. Again, remember, I'm doing this on all gut feeling. And he said, "Okay, when you're selling to this particular government agency that buys billions and billions of dollars of new equipment, at the end of the process, there's one person who has to sign off to buy the equipment. And guess who that person is?"
wow.
"Martha Gurria." He said,
Wow.
"How in 21 million people did you find this lady?" And the thing was, he said, I told him, I said, "Well, remember," he said, "Oh, let me get this straight. This is the lady that you met. You've been going to her office for when you were down here going to school at the university. So you're in her office every week. You were borrowing her books that she was giving you on how to do business in Mexico. You were having milk and cookies with her." Yes. I said, "This is the lady who is treating you like her grandchild." I said, "Pretty much." He said, "Oh my God." I said, "I can't believe it." That was me. I was that person who could find someone like that. And it took
Wow.
him to point out this is a valuable skill. This is something that people
Mhm.
can't do, or most people can't do. And so
Yes.
everyone has a skill. And again, it all depends upon how we looked at it. For me, finding someone was okay, no big deal. But for business, it's a huge deal.
Of course.
And for other people, they may be doing, it's so hard to, pin it down, but it could be, sewing dresses. It could be, again, doing business, marketing. The one person they always say there's three things you need. This was Onassis years ago. He said three things to be successful. One, you have to have a dream. He said two, you need the money. He said, but the money will come if you have the dream. He said money will see that you have this dream, and they'll bring their money to give you the money to make your dream come true. He said, then the third thing, he said, this is the most important piece and the one you may spend your whole life looking for. The one person who can make that dream come true, the one person who has the skill and the knowledge. That's what happened to Ray Kroc when he was doing McDonald's. He ran into the person who knew about finance and explained to him he was in the real estate business, not the burger business. And it was because of that person and his concept of what Ray Kroc could do with McDonald's that took the concept to what we know it is today.
Wow. Wow.
And we could be that person for someone
Yes.
if we acknowledge that what we do so easily is so valuable to somebody. And if I can, I'll give one more quick story.
Yeah,
So
of
I'm with
course. Go
and
for it.
so fast forward about a year, I'm in the office with Antoine. We're working together. He comes by my desk and he gives me this piece of paper. And I said, "What's this?" I said, "Well, I want you to find this person." And his name was Barry Johnson, something like that. And he said, "Okay, who's Barry Johnson?" He said, "Well, he works for the Department of Commerce. It's a huge organization." "Okay, where's Barry work?" "Washington, D.C." "That's all I know. See what you can do, Richard." So later today, I go to his desk, I drop off a piece of paper. He looks at it, it's got a phone number on it. He says, "What's this?" I said, "That's the phone number." "What phone number?" "The phone number for Barry Johnson." And he's like, "This is the phone number for Barry Johnson?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he looks at his watch and he said, "I asked for this information 5 minutes ago." I thought he was upset because it took me so long to find the information. Oh, I forgot to tell you, this is pre Google. So there was no Google search engine at the time.
Wow.
And he knew
Wow.
this, of course. And he said, I said, "Well, I tried to be fast." He said, he said, "I know you're not leaving until you tell me how you did this." I said, "Okay." I called Mary at the Economic Development Center. She gave me over to John in Washington. John got me over to Suzanne, and Suzanne gave me the number. I'm like, easy peasy. I'm out of here. I've got work to do. I'm in a rush. And he says, "You're not listening to me." And I'd been with him long enough to know that those were magic words, that I was missing an important life lesson. So I come back to the desk, when you're all, got too much caffeine in your system, you're ready to go. And I kind of chill. Okay, what am I missing? He said, "You know who I am?" I'm like, "I know who you are." And to put who he was in perspective for some people, we were downtown Dallas, and this helicopter is flying off of a high rise. And he said, "See that helicopter? That was me 10 years ago. Limos were too slow. I needed a helicopter to get from point A to point B." I'm like, wow. Okay. So he's been living the high life, working multi-million-dollar deals in multiple countries, working for government agencies in the US and Europe. Okay. He said, "When I tell you that I have never met someone who can do what you just did, it
Interesting.
means something." I said, "I do it all the time." He said, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean it's not valuable." And that's the key thing I want to impress here. What we do so easily that we disregard, that we kind of blow off, "Yeah, yeah, I know I'm wonderful at that." But it's important to somebody. And it could end up being the thing that we do. And that's exactly what led me to doing the work that I do now.
Oh, wow. That was my next question. So so that was exactly, you stole my question. What brought you to start your nonprofit forever or foster kids?
Well, it's a good question because again, so number one, I had to find out what my talent was and have someone point it out to me for me to acknowledge it. The number two was thinking, okay, which direction or where am I going to go with this talent? Because some talents are easy. If someone's great with numbers, they could be a scientist, they could go into finance, might be more cut and dry. For me, finding people, not necessarily. I wasn't thinking police or FBI or anything like that. I was thinking marketing. That's what I was doing at the time. So for me, it was thinking or getting an idea in my head of where I could go with this talent other than what I was already doing. But what had happened is that I had done work with people, and some associates started to hear that I found someone in Mexico City. I found another person, another part of the country, that I had this talent. And some of them said, "Look, can you find the head of this organization for me? Can you connect me to this politician?" I actually did that. I got a call from a woman. Her daughter was in Mexico City. The mother had dated this politician years ago. They've been best friends at college, and now her daughter's in Mexico City, and the person that the mother had dated was now a big politician. She wanted to make contact with him. And she came to me, and I was able to get through, find the politician, get through to his office. Once he heard who it was, and that was her daughter, he was thrilled and invited her in, introduced her, opened up his circle to her, which is something amazing. And the mother, of course, was like, oh my God, if you ever need anything, just call me. I'm here to help. And so that was an example of what I did. And more people started to hear about me. And then they started to ask questions like, can you find my brother? I haven't seen my brother in 10 years. I've lost track. He's not where he used to live. I don't have a phone number. And this was all in Mexico. And I started doing that. Then I started getting phone calls from foster care agencies saying, we've heard
Oh.
about you. How did you all hear about me? Um, that's always been the strangest part, is that people hear about me and I'm not sure how, but word gets around. And so they would say, I've got a child in foster care. We need to find their relatives. And they have relatives living in Mexico. We don't know what to do. We're hitting a
Oh.
wall. We're struggling to do this. Can you help? Well, sure. And I would go find the relatives. And then because I found the relatives, almost always they would tell the caseworker, well, that child has relatives living in LA. Oh, well, guess where the child goes to live? The relatives in LA. And so it just expanded from there. But this was a concept. I was listening to a talk years ago, and the gentleman on there said some people, they know exactly what they want to be. They're 5 years old and they're going to be an astronaut. And they spend their whole life doing that. Or they're
Right.
5 years old or 10 years old and they say, I'm going to be a dancer or a singer. And that's what they do. Okay. They've got a very clear idea what they're going to do. Then you have people like me. And for some people, multi-talented. So I'm usually good at whatever I do. I learn quickly, I work hard, and I usually become, you know, at an exceptional level. And I'm not saying that to brag, it's just true, and that you put a lot of effort in and you go after something and everyone else isn't, it's not hard to be at the top of the pile there and to be excelling. And so that made it kind of hard. I was like, what do you all like? I like this, I like that. So this gentleman is talking about there's some people who can't quite figure out what they want to do in life, but they're pulled by something into doing what they're going to do in their life.
Mhm.
And they're pulled along. And that's what happened to me. It was the series of requests and opportunities and doing the work that pulled me into working with foster kids, because I'm not a foster child. And my parents never adopted anyone, or we never fostered. We didn't have really touch the foster care system when I was growing up.
Okay.
So it was more, if anything, my passion for working with foster kids comes from being the first of nine and having to keep an eye on my brothers and sisters, having to keep them safe, having a very strong sense of responsibility, and also a strong sense of justice. And foster kids don't get treated well in this country. We don't treat children well in a lot of cases. But when it comes to foster care, those children generally don't get treated well, despite the thousands of people who tried to make life better for a child who has done nothing wrong and is in foster care.
Right.
Those children often are abused and neglected, even in the system. And then you add the immigrant children who are coming over, who have nothing to do with immigration and laws. They're children,
Your
and yet they are
children.
treated like criminals. They are
Wow.
abused and they are neglected. So those children, I have a very strong sense of justice that what we are doing is wrong and someone needs to fix that. And if I'm in that position to fix it for those children, then that's it. That's not a debate. There is no question about what I do or why I would do this. I do it because I'm the best at what I do, and I become the best at what I do over 3 decades. So it's not like it happened yesterday. It's taken a long
Yeah.
time, but I was pulled into this, and now having spent 3 decades working to reunite thousands and thousands of children with their families and relatives. So they're out of those
Wow.
systems and now they're back with family, back on track, and they have a chance at having a normal life, whatever normal is, but at least a better chance of having an improved life.
Yeah. That's 100%. It's very, I met this father a long time ago that his wife left him and took his daughter at the age of 4. So he never for I mean, it was a neighbor of my daughter's, my sister, I'm sorry. So every time I go to Mexico, I asked about him. And the sad part, he never, he died. He died because he never were able to find his daughter. And just to see you, and that's what I really, I was very attracted to you, your conversations, because every time you talk about the children, I hear your passion. I see your determination. I see your and determination. Not everybody has determination, and the sense of justice that you're talking about. Uh, so I can imagine. I saw some of the pictures in your profile in Google about you when you reunite the families. I mean the faces that they have each other. I mean that's priceless. So I'm very glad that life found you and your gift, because I have to tell you something. It is very admirable to see someone like you that after many years, now I know that's almost 30 years that you've been doing this, right? Is able to keep his kindness and love. And after many years of service, um, because sometimes I hear the doctors or the nurses, for instance, that you seem like they are numb of the pain, numb of the suffering, and they act like a little machines after being in the service for a certain time of seeing the same thing. But you, Richard, you are one of a million people that after many years of service, you are, but I see you like a little machine creating that love and compassion and kindness and determination, um and it's very beautiful. The Bible said, when they asked Jesus who will enter the kingdom of heaven, and said, if you are like this little one, and he has a child on his lap. And that's what I see in you, that freshness and the joy. And so I really, it is really an honor to that I ever met you. It is an honor to share this moment with you and to hear that you're a gift for these children. You are the hope for these families that are looking for the children. And I really, really admire you and respect you. And now I do understand, because I was going to ask you your title, that Sherlock Holmes of the foster kids. People, when does this title came? Who gave it to you? Do you remember?
It was during a podcast, and we were talking to prepare for the interview, and they were asking about the many cases I've worked, and they asked, if there was a book or a character that I really liked, and I do. As a child, I grew up reading Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and there are similarities there. Um, the work that we do is what people may not know is that we worked with foster children, and we've been working with foster children for agencies across the country. And some people, um, I'd like to clarify for people, what happens is that a child goes into foster care. Now, if there's a relative nearby, the agency will contact that relative, and the relative will come and take the child if they want to. And often they will. Could be an aunt, could be an uncle, grandparents. If the children don't have a relative who's nearby or who is able and willing to take the child in, then the agency has to do something called family finding. It's a very simple process. It's a three-step process. Number one, they make a list, a huge list of all the relatives that the child knows and that the parents know. Sometimes the parents are willing to help, sometimes they're not. But the
Okay.
first job is to make this list. Hopefully, it's a long list with dozens of relatives because each one of those is a potential person who could take the child in. So we got our list. Number two, we have to get their contact information, which the best contact is a phone number. And number three is the agencies have to notify each of these relatives. So hopefully someone will step up and say, yes, I'll take in little Maria or little Marco. All right. So we come in when it gets to the contact information. Because if the relatives live in Mexico or Guatemala or Brazil, where they speak Portuguese, these agencies have no idea who to contact, how to contact them, what to say. Across this country, as much as although we have 62 plus million Latinos in this country, many foster care agencies don't have someone who speaks Spanish and understands and
Oh,
reads
wow.
Spanish. Oh,
Okay.
it's still a huge problem. And I wrote about that in my book, where one of the officials said, look, I could understand if we had this challenge with Mandarin, but we're talking Spanish. But we do have that problem with agencies across the country being in counties that have 30, 40% Hispanics and nobody in their organization who is doing this work as a caseworker speaking Spanish.
Mhm.
How are you gonna? So they are struggling. They are hitting a wall. These are terms that people have written to me saying, we have no idea. We basically have no idea what to do next. They are struggling and they want help. And so they'll come to my nonprofit and we will look for those relatives. So that's our work
Mm.
there is to get that contact information, pass it off to them. So this is contact information about the relatives of the child, the relatives who are living in another country, in Latin America, anywhere in Latin America. So that includes Mexico, Central, South America, and the Caribbean, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. Any of those countries, and there's 19 that speak Spanish, and then you have Brazil to round it out to 20. Any of those countries we work in. I've worked with every one of those Spanish speaking countries over the years. I've done business, I've worked with the government agencies, I've worked with everyone across the board. That's unique. Very few counties are going to have someone like me who has spent years working with government officials all throughout Latin America. It's not going to happen. So that's an advantage that my nonprofit has that we can bring to the table to help these agencies to find the relatives for these children. And I'd like to share a quick story with you. So we had three girls, 4, 8, and 10. Now, because of their age, they could tell their caseworker that they had two aunts living in Chicago, but that was it. They didn't have a street address, they didn't have phone numbers, and they may not have even had the last name. Whatever information they gave the caseworker was not enough for anyone in the US to find these two aunts living in Chicago. But they did have enough information. They had the city and the state where some relatives were living in Mexico. So that's why they came to my nonprofit. So after just a couple of weeks, we got the information. We passed the information over to the caseworker. So on a Saturday, she's got her translator here in the US. She's calling down to Mexico and she gets a hold of the uncle. And she's talking to the uncle, explaining who she is, why she's calling, about the three girls. And she says, by the way, do you know anything about two aunts living in Chicago? And he says, wait a minute. Seconds pass, and a woman picks up the phone. And the caseworker introduces herself, explains why she's calling, and then asks, do you know anything about two aunts who live in Chicago? And she says, well, of course I do. I'm one of them. The aunts were in the living room having coffee with the relatives. Yeah.
Wow.
They had flown in and they were spending the week with the relatives when the phone call came in.
Wow. That is so, oh, what a
And
satisfaction you have to feel over and over and over and over.
and the caseworker's like, "Oh my God." She said, 17 years. I've never had anything like this ever happen.
Wow.
And of course, the aunts were like, "Absolutely. We'll be back on Tuesday. Let's make an appointment." Where are the three girls now? They're living with their two aunts in Chicago. So
Wow.
that's family finding at its
Yes,
best.
yes, yes,
Find the relatives.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, this is amazing. So tell us a little bit about your book.
So my book came about because having done this work for years, in 2017, the US government decided that they would do something to help prevent so many families from coming up from Latin America to the US. And it was something that no one had ever done before. And that was as soon as a family crossed into the US, they would separate the children from the parents. Didn't matter the reason. And this is important because legally, anybody at that time, once they stepped foot on the US, didn't matter if they flew in, dropped in, swam across, didn't matter. Once their foot hit US soil, they were legally able to ask for asylum and to be
Mm.
afforded to go through the process of asylum and to go in front of a judge and to plead their case for asylum. Well, the government broke the family up. Even if they asked for asylum, it didn't matter. They broke the family, sent children in one direction, mothers and fathers in the other direction. And
Uh-huh.
I will share this to make matters worse. There was a lot of news at the time that the Border Patrol did not separate mothers and children. I worked a case where the child was 6 months old.
Oh
So
gosh,
people can't tell me this
that it
didn't
didn't
happen.
happen.
And there were people who are very reputable people who were with them when they separated these children from the parents. So
No.
just to throw that out there because there was a lot of misinformation. But anyway, this happened in 2017. In 2018, an executive order was signed to reunite these families. And at this time, the numbers, they've gone everywhere. But right now, we're looking at about 7,000 families altogether that were separated.
Wow.
Okay. Um,
Wow.
and so the government started a task force. They put organizations in place, nonprofits to go look for these parents. They did a lot of work in the US to try to find the parents, but there were still several thousand parents they couldn't find. And so in 2020, there were some cases that were what we call cold cases. They had been worked on for a couple
Mm.
of years and they had no idea what to do, where to go, how to find these parents because they'd already looked and they had been unsuccessful. And that's where my nonprofit and I came in. And so at that time, this agency on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security approached me. And in March of 2021, we received several dozens of cases for us to work on to find the parents living in all these countries. And some of these cases, we got the name of someone. So it'd be like someone saying, I want you to find Lilia Ackerman, and she lives in Guatemala. Is there any more information? Nope, that's it. Oh, we may have a date of birth. Any more information? Nope, that's all. Or, no, we don't have a date of birth. That's it. You got a name and you got a country. We still closed it. We still found. So if you got lost in Guatemala, I would have found you. Um, we did find those people. And I did this in lots of countries: Honduras, Brazil, Argentina,
Wow.
all over Latin America with just that little information. So we've done this for now more than 100 families. We have found more than 100 mothers and
That is
fathers
beautiful.
who are now being reunited with their child. In some cases, they have not seen their child in 6 years. We're getting close to 7 years.
Oh
Right,
gosh.
right now during summer, we will be hitting
No,
the
that is
7 year.
horrible.
I wish I say anniversary, but that's a too nice a word for this horrible situation that these kids have been separated.
I
I
have
have
two children. I have two children. I have to tell you, just to hear you talking about this, that they haven't seen their parents and the baby that it was separated. I mean, it must be a horrible experience. I mean, I came to USA and I by myself, and I promised my daughters to bring them 6 months later. I have to tell you, this is the most horrible 6 months of my life. Of my life. They stay with their father in Mexico, and it was for some reason we didn't have cellular phones. I didn't even own a phone. I was living in a room. I didn't own anything. So for me to make a phone call, it was like it was a miracle. And for some reason, I don't remember the whole story. I couldn't contact the father. I couldn't contact the brother, and I was freaking out. I thought for a moment that he stole my children, and I really wanted to die. I mean, it was. I mean, thank you God. It was soon. I think it was for a month. I couldn't contact anyone, but I can imagine 7 years. I can imagine never seeing my children, never hear from them. I mean, it really tear your heart apart, your life. So your services are just so wonderful. Again, I mean, you are a gift to these families, that you are hope for these agencies. And if I admire you before, now I say thank you, God, for Richard. Thank
well,
you, thank you.
it's I see it as a privilege and an honor that I'm able to take my talents and use it in this way and to help these families. Again, I know there's a lot of politics around immigration, and in some ways, rightly so. Every country has to have limits. But despite all that, despite whatever the politicians are doing or not doing, at the end of the day, it's a child. And it's a
Yes.
child that, in this case, the courts ruled that what was done was illegal. That's the reason for the reunification. There's now have been two executive orders to reunite them. I wrote the book because there was so much bad information out there coming from different sides who had their own agendas. This book, I tried to make it as apolitical as possible. Um, I found sources that were identified as either leaning left or leaning right, and so I didn't touch them because I knew that they were leaning to keep it just factual. People can derive or read the book and think whatever they want to, but it talks about the terrible situation with the immigrant children and why that because a lot of those kids were put in foster care
Right.
and given to counties who, again, don't have people who speak Spanish. Now you've got people coming from Guatemala who speak indigenous languages like Mam, Quiche,
Mm,
Acateco. The people in the county in New York or Texas or California, they have no chance of knowing how to speak these
of course.
languages because the international organizations I work with, they are challenged to have someone to
Mm,
speak these languages. So what hope does a county have
right.
if the federal government at the federal level they are challenged to do this? And that's the reality, and that's one of the driving forces behind what I do, and that's why I wrote the book so the public could get an understanding of how this happened, what's been going on. Why is it that 3 weeks ago the New York Post had an article saying that there's 1,400 children still not reunited nearly 7 years later? Why is that? There's a reason for that. And that reason is in the book. Why do have we not succeeded in reuniting all these children? And not only immigrant children were caught up in this, US born children were caught up in this. And those children were passed into foster care. So this has been a horrible, horrible tragedy that has impacted both US born citizens and their families, immigrant children, but the key word there is children. Children
Yes.
as young as 6 months old, children who came in at 8 years old and have now spent 7 years of their life away from their mother and father. Some kids who have spent twice as long as they were old, they were 3 years old. 10% of the cases I worked were 5 years and younger. And now they spent twice of their life, another 5, 7 years here in the US away, not having hugged their mother or father. And that's the way I look at it. And that's what drives me. That's what gets me up in the morning. Someone says, what's your why? I don't need to have that why on the wall. What gets you out of bed? I don't need coffee to get me out of bed. Knowing that if I don't do this, the chances, because the cases I work, they're cold cases. People have worked on them for 4 years. They've tried their best, but it wasn't good enough. And they have failed. And then I get a case like the one I did in Argentina. We got
Mhm.
the case, and 5 days later, we closed it. And it had been worked on
It's
for four
beautiful.
years.
Very powerful. Very powerful.
So that's why I do what I do, knowing that that's what I can bring and the abilities that my organization, my team members who are fabulous, fabulous people living in these countries, working in these countries, that we're able to do this and to make this difference for these families.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So you had that book behind you. Can you show us?
Yes, absolutely. Here it is. It's
A little bit. Yeah, perfect. To no harm. That is very powerful. And I can wait to read it. I can wait to read it and to expose the truth. And people deserve, because you're right. We hear the news, and we know that there are no news really, because you don't know what the truth. But now I'm grateful that you were so brave and decide to expose the truth, so people deserve to know what really is happening with these families at the border, what immigration is doing, and the hope that you bring for them. And then you link of you have it on Amazon. How do they get your copy of your book?
Yes, so you can definitely go to Amazon, put in Do No Harm. I'd recommend putting my last name, Villasana, as you see here. There are a lot of books with that title. I do want to say this, the book ends with hope. This is not a hopeless situation. And that's the one thing I always want to impress on people. Yes, it's bad. We could do so much better. And there are thousands of people working to make this better for these children. So there is hope. And I highlight some of those key people at the end of the book. And there are stories, nearly a dozen stories of the cases where we found the relatives, we found a father, we found a grandmother, and they came in and they took that child out of the situation, out of foster care, and gave them a home. So there is a lot of hope. We have to know where we are, and where we are is not a good place. We need to know that we want to do better, and we can improve, and we can. But we have to have hope that it
Yes,
can get better, and it can, because in many cases we have brought hope to that child and have changed
yes,
their life forever. And so it's not something that can't be done. We just need more people willing to jump in and to give a little time or to donate, which of course is a nonprofit. They can always go to our website and donate. We are always thrilled for someone to donate. That's how we function. The more donations, the more children we can help. It's just simple mathematics and economics. You can only do so much with wanting, but it does take funding and donations
yes.
to get those wheels moving and to get people to be able to do the things they need to do so that we can make these differences for the children.
So how people can contact you, Richard?
Well, they can definitely contact me at the phone number right here, uh, and that will go directly to me. If they don't get me, it means I'm in the middle of a meeting or working on a child's case. They can always leave me a message and let me know how they heard about me, and if they'd like to talk to me. They can also email us at info at forever homes for, that's FOR, foster kids The information is on the website. It's easy to find. We've got it there so that people don't have to fill out those forms. I hate those forms. And they
Yeah.
could, call us, email us, text, find us on Facebook. Any one of those ways, we're happy to help in any way. And we do. We get lots of people who ask us, how can I become a foster parent? How can I adopt a child? And even though we don't spend our time in that particular arena, we answer because we answer. And there's a lot of agencies, unfortunately, they don't. So we get a lot of people asking us questions because they know we're going to respond and give them some real practical information to help them move forward on whatever it is they'd like to do to help a child.
Beautiful. Now, to close our interview today, I would like to share, working as entrepreneur and working from home, they can bring a lot of uh, heavy weight on the family. So, what do you do to separate, to balance working from home and at the same time spend time with your family, your wife?
Well, I would say having a wife that it's definitely important to have time set aside
Very.
because it is so important. I mean, that partner that we have is someone we chose to be with. And if we chose to be with this person, we owe it to them to let them know how important they are in our life. And my wife, Christina, is very important in my life. And so I show that by being with her, spending time with her, not answering the phone, not playing on the phone when we're doing something. That's something we do back and forth, like, "You're on the phone." "Oh, I'm putting it away." Um, just really disconnecting so that even if we're watching TV, it's one thing to watch TV, and it's another to be sitting next to someone and having them play on their phone when they're somewhere else. Um, if we're in our cars, you know, talking to that person, listening to that person. So those are little things that we can do to let the other person know that we care. And it's the same things we would do with our children. We would listen to them, let them know that they're loved and that they're important to us. And those are the same things that I do with Christina and I do with my friends. That when I'm with them, and they know
Beautiful.
that I'm with them. And we have to have those boundaries. It's absolutely critical. And for some people who are in their office, they may be able to relate. So sometimes I get asked the question, why are you going for a drive? I just need to get out of the house. And sometimes if you're that type of person, go for it. Get outside. Go somewhere by yourself. We also need our me time. And all too often, you know, a person may be a giver so much so that they ignore themselves, and that's not right. And they
Yes.
really need to give themselves, even if it's 5, 10 minute breaks somewhere away from it all,
Yeah.
it can be rejuvenating to do that. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is everything. We those hope you and enjoyed as much as I did to hear the powerful story and what Richard is doing. All the links are going to be underneath of this video. If you want to contact him, ask him more questions, be part of his nonprofit organization, buy his book, and learn more about him. Now, this you hear what he said. I know everybody has a gift. So whatever you are, believe that you have a gift, and you need. And if you can't find your life purpose yet, life will find you when you recognize your gift. And that was a very valuable lesson. That one of the many that we learned from Richard. So again, if you have any question, any suggested topic, or want to order our books, Richard and mine. Well, mine you can do it through liliaackermancoach.com and just click the link below. And please don't forget to share, to like, to make a comment, because this is the only way that we can that this video can roll over the social media. And you never know who needs to hear the words of Richard share with us to bring hope, to reunite with the family, to hire his services. So you never know who is waiting for this message. So until our next video, please don't forget to love more and forgive more. And this is Lilia Ackerman, your host. See you next time. Bye. Okay. I too. I never know what is stop the recording.